On June the 18th, 2011, Amy Winehouse staggered on stage at Kalemegdan Park in Belgrade, Serbia, for the opening night of what was meant to be a 12-day European tour intended to kickstart her career. What actually happened, however, has gone down in history as one of the worst, most disastrous, truly distressing and tragic live shows in history. A show which one Serbian newspaper described as the worst in the history of Belgrade. And today I want to show you what happened, but I also want to explain a little bit of why it happened. Let's start, briefly, with Amy Winehouse, the teenager. Even as a youngster, she was given to mood swings and very intense feelings. Her best friend and closest confidant, Tyler James, says this about their time together at school. "We were both fucked up teenagers, and we saw that in each other. We were depressed, anxious, insecure. She'd say to me, 'You get depressed like me, don't you?' Amy was put on antidepressants at 14. She was taught at a young age that chemicals were how you fix your head, not go and talk to somebody. Amy started drinking before me. She was maybe 12. She was smoking weed the whole time I knew her. Amy was quite an intense personality, but also a phenomenally talented singer, so much so that she got signed to a management company at 17, then she got a publishing contract and a record deal at 18, with a cumulative advance of approximately £500,000. All of a sudden, she was rich. Talking about the period in which she started work on her first album, Frank, Tyler says, "This was the proper start of Amy's eating disorders, an ongoing struggle with anorexia and bulimia. She invented something called the OxoCube Haribo diet, in which if you wanted something savoury, you would dissolve an OxoCube in water, and if you wanted something sweet, you would have a single Haribo. She was suddenly seeing photographs of herself constantly and becoming obsessive about her weight. And when the promotional period for her first album drew to a close, she found herself both very wealthy and at a loose end. And it was at this point that her compulsive behaviour began to become more pronounced. Very quickly after the Frank cycle ended, Amy started to lose the plot. She wasn't happy, she was really bored. She'd always been a clean freak, and now she was seriously OCD. She was awake all night cleaning in her Adidas tracksuit. It was relentless, she couldn't leave a cup on the dresser. She wasn't stupid, she noticed the changed behaviour in herself and tried to do something about it. She rang her mum, and I heard her ask her straight, "Mum, I need to go back on them tablets," meaning the antidepressants she was on when she was a teenager. Amy came off the phone, didn't say much about what was said, but she never did go back on the tablets. But she still thought, like she always did, that chemicals were the answer. So every night, the bottle of Doolies started to appear. Her mum says, "In those early days of fame, I became increasingly aware that Amy was drinking more, particularly before she went on stage." Amy now began day drinking, just getting up in the morning and going straight down her local pub in Camden. And it was in her day drinking phase that she met Blake Fielder Civil and fell head over heels in love with him. Whereas Amy only smoked weed, Blake was a serious, hardcore drug addict. And as she got more involved with him, she got drawn into that world as well. Her dad, Mitch, says this, "My first impression of Blake was that he seemed to be a decent and respectful guy, if a bit scruffy. I couldn't have been more wrong. In the light of what happened later, I'm pretty sure that Amy had started smoking heroin and crack cocaine by then, although at the time I had no idea." Much of Amy's second album, Back to Black, was written about Blake and the strange love triangle they were in before they became an official item. But unlike her first album, this one just exploded. It became, at the time, the UK's best-selling album of the 21st century. At the Grammys, Amy won Best New Artist, Best Pop Vocal Album, Record of the Year, Song of the Year for Rehab, Best Female Pop Vocal Performance, and was nominated for Album of the Year. It was, hands down, the biggest British album of the decade. It was just massive. Back to Black would end up selling 20 million copies worldwide, launching Amy into levels of wealth she'd never dreamed of, and making her a full-blown global megastar. But with these new, vast sums of money at her disposal, there was now no financial limit on her and Blake's drug use. So They just carried on down the spiral together. The two of them got married without telling anyone in Miami on the 18th of May, and the drug use just got worse. Amy was profoundly emotionally attached to Blake Fielder Civil, but shortly after their marriage, he got arrested and sent down for GBH and perverting the course of justice, which of course sent Amy even further down the spiral. Amy wasn't well. She needed help. She needed to go to a psychiatric unit in a hospital. She was a heroin addict, a crack addict. She had bulimia. She was a self-harmer. In the summer of 2008, Amy was hospitalised after a particularly spectacular meltdown. After hospital, she was sent away to the island of St. Lucia in the Caribbean, a place where there were no drugs whatsoever, to give her time and space to come back to normality, to start writing music and recording songs once again. But while there were no drugs on the island, there was alcohol, and lots of it. And even though St. Lucia worked and she did get finally properly free of drugs, what actually happened there was she mostly just switched over to alcohol instead. Class A drugs and her husband, Blake Fielder Civil, had all been part of that chapter of her life, and so once she was getting free of drugs, her divorce began to process while he was still in jail. After 8 months in St. Lucia, she returned to the UK, and what followed was a period of relative calm and peace. For a while, she had a big house out in the country in Hadley Wood, with no real major catastrophes. She was still drinking a lot, however, but any time it went too far, she had a private London hospital where she would just check herself in any time she needed any help or felt like she needed looking after. While she still would have binges, the serious pursuit of sobriety was now in her sights, and little by little, she seemed to be taking ground. But then came the duet with Tony Bennett. Amy had done so little performing, and this was such a high-pressure moment that she absolutely insisted on a glass of wine to calm her nerves before singing in the studio. That glass of wine calmed her down and enabled her to sing properly with Tony. And, weirdly, that made something kind of click in her head going forward, where she said, "I must have alcohol to be able to sing." And here's the proof. An insane all-night drinking binge followed the recording session, which would turn out to be Amy's last ever studio recording before her death. In the end, there was an intervention, and Amy Winehouse had to go to rehab. She was in there for a week, and initially at first, it seemed to have worked. But that light at the end of the tunnel turned out to be an oncoming train, because her record company wanted her out on tour earning money again now. In her very fragile mental state at that time, the biggest thing it seems like she needed was zero stress, because any stressful situation triggered the drinking. Amy didn't want to do the tour, but it seemed, in the end, like it was non-negotiable. After the Priory, she was sober and healthy again for weeks, but now the 12-date European tour was imminent, which she'd long had reservations about. When there had been an intervention, doctors' letters saying if she drank any more she'd die, the Priory saying there was so much alcohol in her blood she shouldn't be alive, I thought someone surely must be thinking about cancelling this tour. If that thought did cross people's minds, I never heard about it, and one thing was certain: by the time the tour came around, she definitely didn't want to do it. So, she sabotaged it. As the first gig of the tour in Belgrade grew closer and closer, almost as an act of protest against having to do it against her will, Amy began to drink herself into oblivion. And by the time the day came to fly out to Serbia, she had been drinking solid for 5 days. She was so delirious and weak, the boys had to help her onto the plane, arms around her, guiding her up the steps. I gave Amy her withdrawal medication, Librium, to prevent the onset of a seizure. We got to the Hyatt Hotel in Belgrade. She wasn't just in a bad way, sick, shaky, withdrawing. She was mostly semi-unconscious. She should have been in hospital. For 8 hours, every hour, I'm getting calls from management. Is she all right? I kept saying, no, she's completely unconscious. There's no way she can do a gig tonight. It's not possible. This can't happen. She's not even awake. They replied, no, she'll be all right. All I could think of was to give her some Pro Plus, liven her up. Only now Ray, her manager, came in. I was out of the room for 5 minutes, and when I came back, Amy had downed a glass of wine. I know how it will have happened. She would have been convinced she needed one to perform, and argued with Ray until she got it. I wasn't there when she did. If I had been, I would have stepped in, because you cannot drink on Librium. What was happening to Amy now was what the medics tell you can happen with alcohol and Librium, like she was blacking out while conscious. 5 minutes before she was due to go on stage, Ray said to me, "What have you given her?" I wanted to kill him. And so now you get the real idea of the state Amy was in just before she took to the stage in Belgrade. Now let's take a look at the gig. I'm going to talk you through what happened, and I will subtitle it as best as I possibly can and explain as we go through. Presumably due to Amy's issues and semi-blacked out state, the show started an hour late, so the crowd were already pretty antagonised. The show opens with Amy running on stage and hugging the guitarist. Then, while the audience are still cheering, for some reason she sits down on the monitor and tries unsuccessfully to take off one of her shoes and falls over. She hugs Zalon, one of the backing singers, and then manages to get one shoe off. She sits on the monitor again, finally manages to get the second shoe off, and then stumbles up to the microphone. The first song in the set is Just Friends, and she does manage to get through a few lines of it, albeit drunkenly. But then she falls silent for a moment, seemingly having forgotten the lyrics, and then decides to cover by suddenly introducing the band. And as she's trying to introduce the band in the wrong place, she forgets some of their names as well.
What's it called? What's it called? No, what's it called? Oh, no, at the end of the dictionary. Oh, but at the end of the register, school.
You can hear the audience are already getting pissed off, and it's only the first song.
I'll never love you. Like you! Like her.
As the song nears its end, Amy carries on shouting, suddenly realises the song is closing, and manages to fit in the last two words.
Alright, people, let me tell you something. I can't get over the fact that
After the first song, Amy seems to suggest that Zalon is going to get shot by a sniper, and then asks him 3 times what the next song is, seeming to not take in his answer every time.
Let me ask you something though. Wait. I think that, Val.
Yes, baby.
I think that they will get shot first.
Maybe, yeah.
But I mean, like,
Yeah,
that would be at long range.
Yeah.
Be at long range.
of course.
What's the next? Oh,
Addicted.
Catch me in your arms, still.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Addicted.
Somewhere in the world.
Addicted.
The next song is Addicted, and this time Amy only manages one single line before falling silent again, while the band just carry on without her. And you may have noticed that she's got her arms crossed almost constantly here, and that goes on in some form throughout almost the entire gig. I think it's a kind of self-soothing and psychological self-defense thing, a bit like she's hugging herself. I think after saying this, she then kind of realises that the words are on a screen below on the auto cue and starts attempting to sing them. Before just kind of giving up, kind of clapping her hands together, and then wandering back over to her guitarist while the band just carry on going through the motions with no vocals. The crowd haven't quite given up yet though, and they give her some encouragement to come back to the mic, which she does, but then just stands there looking utterly disgusted. She looks at the auto cue again, does the clap thing again, and then has another go at singing. She manages a few lines, but then just sort of drifts off again, as if the whole thing to her is just one massive, confusing hallucination. The next track is Tears Dry on Their Own, and the same pattern repeats again. She sings just a tiny bit at the beginning, and then just falls silent. She then moves over to stand next to Zalon, who seems to make her smile and light up a little bit more, and seem less alone and confused. And at this gig, he was the person that she would continually look to, kind of helplessly, all throughout. As the band play, she attempts to dance along with Zalon, but it's a bit ghostly and kind of off. And as the song rolls on, she just wanders the stage again looking miserable. And now the crowd are booing and angry. There are some cheers in amongst all the anger, but most of what you can hear from the crowd at this point is rage. According to The Guardian, tickets were priced at £35 in a country where the average wages were £265. So the audience's fury is probably somewhat understandable. Next up, Amy attempted to introduce the band for the second time.
And if you don't know, now you know. I'm sorry I said that the first time. If you don't know, now you know. Anyway, we're getting to the bit. Okay, his mum was a Jew. No? Yeah, no. Yeah. And his dad was a Nazi. Well, to me they are. Anyway, Sam, not anywhere, I mean, sorry, there, George, Ben, to my left, best boy in the world, apart from him, listen, we've got a passport. Listen, Del, I love you, but I'm not getting shot. Yeah, but I love you like probably more than my dad or Ray and shit. But I'm not getting shot.
And during this section, she invited Zalon to take over lead vocals.
Basically, like singing better. Just yeah, but you have to catch me though. Okay, I'm just letting you know that I am the fault.
The next song is Some Unholy War, and exactly the same thing happens yet again. She sings just one line, but then she looks over at Zalon as if to say, "What the hell? Why aren't you singing lead?"
If my head was fighting some holy
As the song progresses, she seems to get increasingly distressed and looks close to tears at one point. Next up, there's a brief moment of respite from all the painful viewing, as Zalon does sing lead on the song Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And you can see from her facial expressions that all throughout, Amy really is just on another planet, pulling faces and kind of lolling around a bit. And after the song, Zalon gets the first wholehearted round of applause since the gig started.
As an audience, yeah? Don't you think they look so handsome, like they're
Next up is one of just two songs that she kind of made it all the way through in the entire set. This is Back to Black. She seems to really make an effort to get all the way through this one, and she manages most of it for the first time in the set. She flings her mic on the ground towards the end. Then she goes and takes Zalon's mic, but she doesn't actually sing into it. And then what follows is a very long pause where there is clearly a conversation being had on stage between Amy and the band, presumably her saying that she doesn't want to carry on. And there is also a chant that started of Amy, shamey from the audience. Eventually the band goes into Love is a Losing Game, and Amy again makes an effort, kind of Bob Dylaning her way through the lyrics being read off the auto cue. She then starts saying these random disconnected phrases into the mic before the song kind of sputters to a halt in the usual way.
What the fuck are Tinder? Lips are down. Really? Love is Hey, do you know that Zal? One time, like Sam, like
The boos continue. There is another long, protracted discussion with the backing singers, probably Amy saying she wants to leave again. The band then goes into You Know I'm No Good. Amy misses the beginning here and also looks like she's in tears for a few moments in this one as well. She then starts messing up her beehive and mucking around with her hair until the song finishes. Next came the song Valerie, which was the only other song in the set where she kind of muddled her way all the way through. She does lose her way, however, when the second verse hits once again, so this time she physically drags Zalon over to sing it. However, by this point she was beginning to seriously run out of steam. After Valerie, she only stayed on stage for one more song. And so now we come to the final Amy Winehouse song in the final Amy Winehouse concert in history. The song's called You're Wondering Now, a cover of a song by the Specials, which is mostly sung by Zalon with Amy stood next to him, just singing along, not fully on the mic. And after this song, Amy left the stage. Zalon sang 2 further songs, and then the gig was over. And the lyrics to the last song that Amy ever sang at the last ever Amy Winehouse concert are strangely poignant. You're wondering now what to do, now you know this is the end. You're wondering how you will pay for the way you misbehave. I won't return. Forever you will wait. After the Belgrade show, Amy was back in the headlines, and there was outrage in Serbia. The rest of the tour was cancelled and Amy went back to London. Belgrade was on the 18th of June 2011, and 1 month later, on July the 20th, she appeared on stage dancing next to her goddaughter. And 3 days after that video, Amy passed away from alcohol poisoning. The coroner's verdict was misadventure through high levels of alcohol. A large part of that was the stress her body went through with bulimia. It wrecks your cardiovascular system, and her body wasn't strong enough to cope. There were no illegal drugs found in her body. I think in our world and in our culture, It's way too easy to see the person on a screen as not really entirely human. They're famous, so they're different. But I hope today that by telling a little bit of Amy's backstory as well, a bit of context to what actually led up to this gig, perhaps you might look at the Belgrade gig rather as the catastrophic effects of drug and alcohol abuse on a supreme musical talent, a real fragile human being with feelings and a soul who was taken away from us an entire lifetime too soon. A massive thank you as always to all my supporters on Patreon, and if you would be interested in signing up for exclusive bonus content, the link is in the description. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.